Agency-client relationships. Now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Trevor Lai in Shanghai. This week on Thoughtful China, we'll talk about the words every agency director hates to hear from a client. We're having a pitch. In the early days of advertising, accounts often stayed with agencies for years, even decades. Today in China, agencies often compete for short-term projects. Marketers are under constant pressure to improve the ways they source, manage, and align resources, such as advertising agencies and marketing services providers. This week on Thoughtful China, we'll talk about winning pitch strategies, as well as procurement and compensation policies, cost containment, and maintaining agency-client relationships, while our own PT Black will share haggling tips from China's street markets. But first, with us is Sarah Millard, Director of Indirect Procurement for Coca-Cola in Greater China and Korea. Sarah, tell us a bit about what you do at Coca-Cola.
I lead a team that support the Coca-Cola China business unit in managing our operational and marketing expenditure. Primary focus is on our marketing expenditure because of the importance to the business and also the level of spend that we have in that area.
And how is this job different in China than in other Western markets?
My first response would be speed is a big difference. The market here in China is changing so rapidly that the nature of our business is changing on a daily basis. So for us on a procurement perspective, we're constantly having to adapt and change the way that we operate and the way that we work very quickly with our marketing teams.
Can you give an example of one of these changes that's come across that's quite significant in your time?
I think compensation models is a very good example of how that has changed, both in terms of the industry, not only to China, but in a global perspective. But here in China, people are very willing to adapt very quickly to a model that may have taken longer to apply in other markets. So, for example, the implementation of value-based compensation that we have here, that has been applied and addressed very quickly, that I think in other markets it's taken longer.
And what do you look for in agency pitches?
We look for a number of factors. We have criteria and we do set scorecards when we're managing pitch processes. Very critical for us is the capability and the resource of the agencies that we're looking at, the skill sets and the knowledge and experience that they can bring specifically about the China market. We look for creativity, of course, but we also look for a really strong business awareness, an understanding of the Coca-Cola business in China and the consumers that we're addressing. Integrity is also a very important part, and I think naturally productivity and ensuring that we get the best value from the services being provided.
Now, you talked about significant changes in the marketplace affecting the procurement process, but how have some of these changes reflected in how agencies approach you and perhaps the way that they're even pitching, whether it's how they prepare their presentations or their proposals? How have you seen their behavior change?
I think the idea of just presenting a PowerPoint is no longer satisfactory. Anyone can do that. I think really very much you have to have an understanding of the content and an ability to actually demonstrate that you can deliver the work in China. It's very easy to say that you have all these skills and services, but you actually need to be able to demonstrate that and demonstrate it not just by the experiences you have in a global market, but also experiences that you have delivered here in China.
What are some of the mistakes you've seen in pitch presentations in China?
Over-promising is a key one. Over-promising and not giving examples of their experience and skill set, but not making it applicable to the China market, to actually having it demonstrated that it's actually China market that it was delivered in. But definitely over-promising. saying that they can deliver more than when you actually then put it into practice is realised. And I think also ensuring during the process that you have the people that are going to be working with the client on a daily basis, taking the leadership, taking the role, empowering them within the pitch process, because after all, those will be the people you're working with.
Thanks, Sarah. Now PT Black will share haggling tips from China's street markets.
Global procurement officers are the hardcore shoppers of the corporate ecosystem. Their job used to be like shopping at a mall, a safe place for comparing prices among similar, familiar brands. That was then. Today's communication world has become chaotic, cutthroat, and confusing. Less like a mall, and more like a street market. In my long hours shopping at street markets here in China, I've come up with a simple policy that allows me to end my days both satisfied and sane. I call it my SKEW plan, S-K-E-W. S is for smile. Bargaining, whether over pearls or PR services, can get ugly fast. Don't take any of it personally. Both parties are playing a set role, and naturally will exploit every advantage. When things get too heated, remember to step aside, maybe make a joke, and reestablish some basic human connection. K is for knowledge. Good bargaining requires that both sides know what they're doing. But markets are always in flux, so the information they use is both formal and informal. Good bargainers, therefore, are always observing others and pooling information together. Negotiations themselves can be a valuable source of information for both parties. E is for explain. Haggling is all about a back and forth, and the goal is to stump the other guy. Buyers toss out a flurry of questions, each of which needs a response. Smart sellers come with answers ready for the crucial questions, especially those about quality and measurements. Shops here don't hesitate to crush a perfect pearl just to show that the necklace itself is real. Inevitably, though, some of the questions asked aren't relevant, and others simply have no answer. A smart seller knows not to answer those, but takes the time to explain the reasoning why. So that gives us S, K, and E. The final letter is W. W is for walk. In a market-style negotiation, both sides have the power to walk away. The customer is right, unless the seller decides it's not worth the hassle. So it is a risky business. Happy haggling.
Thanks, PT. With me now is Jeff Ma, TBWA Group's Chief Marketing Officer, Greater China. Melvin Goh, President of Mindshare China, and Seth Grossman, Managing Director of Karat China. We're talking about agency-client relationships this week, including pitches, procurement, and compensation. You've all led pitches in China before, so let's start there. Seth, procurement in China. Is that your friend, your enemy, or somewhere in between?
I think the challenge really is to turn them from foe into friend. And it's not easy, and it's not always successful. Really the challenge is how do we define what we're trying to achieve with the procurement team. It's certain procurement directors are very much focused on only driving to the absolute lowest cost and lowest possible cost possible. However, what we're really trying to get to is a sense of shared value, a sense where we're all looking to, how should I say, balance out what we're trying to get in terms of the outcomes, make sure that the team resources, as well as the pricing that we need to do is all there. When we do that, actually you find that defining that with the procurement team becomes a positive at the very end. But sometimes the process can be quite tense and quite antagonistic throughout. But ultimately, some of the best relationships I've developed over the years have been with procurement officials who understand really what we're trying to achieve.
But for those that don't understand and are really focused on the pricing, is that a journey that's possible to take them through? Or do you find in China that if they've already got their mindset in that zone, rather than working on those clients, that you actually have to end up focusing on perhaps more progressive clients?
Well, I think that's really part of what leadership is all about, is making the choices of who you want to work with and who you don't want to work with. And ultimately, we've made decisions to not participate in reviews where we don't feel that the agency's true value is being recognized. I think one of the key issues that we see in our industry is agency and client turnover, and the highest turnover comes from those clients who don't see the total value in the relationship and see it only in terms of price. And those are the types of relationships that ideally we'd like to avoid, because it's hard to build a successful business around that type of model.
I have a question for Seth. My question to you is if, for example, if you were to turn down a review, how do we make sure that we don't get sort of being punished by the client? So you never be invited again. You know? I mean, it's also always a CEO, and it's a very difficult call because if I turn them down, maybe I would never get a pitch anymore. You know?
I think it really comes down to the reasons why you're turning it down. There's many reasons why you choose to participate and many reasons why you choose not to participate. I think certain times, if you feel that the chemistry and what you're being asked for is just not right, well, honestly, unless that client is prepared to change, then it's never going to be right. But other times, there's other reasons why it doesn't come back, and those relationships have to be rebuilt. And they are, and they are. And quite often you have clients that move away due to price, but then often come back when they realize the value's not there.
That's true.
And we've had that quite often.
That's true, yeah.
I just want to adding one more point. I think winning in the presentation may be just halfway to the final, deal, final success. There's a lot of, negotiation, procurement thing will come in the second stage. I think that will take more energy, more patience, and and more detailed, preparation analysis to achieve the, the final way.
Tell us about the worst pitch process that you've been a part of. Obviously not being specific, but I mean in terms of a process that maybe you won the presentation and then found out that there was a mountain of, barricades preventing you from actually getting the contract done.
I heard one, I read on the newspaper, it didn't really happen to the agency I work for.
Right.
There's a client in Beijing, they called for the agency pitch on Friday, and they asked the agency to come back with a presentation on Monday. But by Sunday night, they canceled the pitch. I think it was on the magazine. I think it's pretty outrageous. Yeah. I think that's the worst, pitch process I ever heard of.
Do you think, as agencies, you do a good job of holding clients accountable for decisions, though? So when you lose, do you ever go back to the clients and actually force them to give you feedback?
I'll use the classic, it depends. But there are some clients who I genuinely appreciate because they've given some very harsh feedback. I'd like to say we win more than our fair share, but we have lost and we've gotten some pretty harsh feedback. But it's, if you don't have a thick skin in this industry of understanding where you're weaker than your competition, change.
For media agencies, they're usually compensated with a percentage of media spend, but for creative agencies, it's a little bit more difficult. So what's the standard compensation methodology for creative agencies?
Right, we basically live on, fee-based remunerations. It's quite, universal. It's staff costs plus, overheads and profit margin. And when you work on some global accounts, global, clients, there's some fixed rates we have to follow. So it's quite, universal. And, we're starting to, talk to the client, negotiate with the client to building some, KPIs, and to, if we exceed their, expectation, the target we set at the very beginning, agency can, get a certain amount of increase on the, fee as, incentive as bonus.
Now, have you said that you've started to talk to clients, but has this actually successfully been implemented in any client examples?
I would say we've been quite successful implementing this with some of the key global, clients, but not all the clients. I think the local clients are just, picking up on that part.
So you actually develop with the client, KPIs, and then they evaluate the return on investment, and then the agency is able to collect.
I think in most of cases, it's linked, to the sales transactions, the brand awareness. So we set the campaign KPI or the brand KPI, but most of them are still very quantitative. I think there's some invisible value we create for the client. We see this happen every day. An idea, a slogan, or a brand manifesto that client can use internally to motivate their staff. They can talk to to their trade partners to align the actions. And these are some invisible hidden value that we create for the client, and those values last, and those values, those parts are also contribute to the total brand success. So creativity doesn't equal to immediate sales in some cases. creative agency are not only building the brand sales for the client, but also the long-term, growth and brand equity.
So when you talk about long-term, that's interesting. Do you find in general that most advertisers in China are selecting agencies through the pitch process as actual long-term partners, or really more like short-term vendors? Because if you're saying long-term partnerships, but the review's up every year, that seems to be a conflicting message.
Let me break down the market into 4 groups. I think advertisers in China, there are 4 groups. I think the first group are those that has a global relationship. And so when they do the deal, you have, let's say, 10, 20, 30 markets. And okay, that's one block. This group tends to be a bit more longer term in nature, right? So you do a deal with the bank, and then we have a multi-year relationship. So pitches don't come in very often. The other group is the same group of MNCs, but these MNCs are locally managed. The global folks don't get very involved. So these tend to be mid-term, short-term, or long-term. It depends on the clients. And the third group are the local mainland clients. These are the ones that will pitch you every year, right? And then the fourth group are the local SME clients. These groups are very deal-driven, right? Because they're SMEs, so they're very profit-driven, cost-driven.
And for all 3 of you, very briefly, in one sentence, could you describe to me a bad client in China?
I won't say it's bad clients. Maybe it's a misfit. It's not the right client for, this agency or our agency. If they don't know what they want and they don't pay for what they want, and if they just treat agency like a vending machine of ideas, I think it's not the right type of client we don't want to, work with. And on top of that, I think culturally fit is very important. For example, TBWA stands for disruption. If the client doesn't buy into disruption, they may not be a right client for us.
Seth?
Clients that don't inspire passion. If you're not passionate about what you're going to do, you'll never succeed at it. And a client that doesn't make the team feel passionate about their work is not a good client.
Melvin?
There's no bad client. It's just poor partnerships.
Okay. Melvin, Seth, Jeff, thanks for being on Thoughtful China. That wraps it up for today. Please subscribe to us on Tudo and YouTube. You can also follow us on Weibo and Twitter and join our LinkedIn group. We'll see you again.